Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome you to A Turning Point for Trans Rights, President Biden's order lifting the transgender military ban. My name is Imani Rupert Gordon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the Executive Director for the National Center for Lesbian Rights. This discussion today will be co-hosted by both GLAD or GLBTQ legal advocates and defenders and the National Center for Lesbian Rights. GLAD's work is through strategic litigation, public policy advocacy, and education. They work in New England and nationally to create a just society free of discrimination based on gender identity and expression, HIV status, and sexual orientation. And the National Center for Lesbian Rights works to achieve civil and human rights for all LGBTQ people and our families. We do this through litigation, legislation, public policy, and community education. Today, we'll be discussing the impact of President Biden's executive order on Monday that lifted the transgender military ban. This ban represented some of the worst parts of our country and our history. That's why as soon as it was enacted, GLAD and NCLR worked together to become the first to challenge it. Today, we're going to be discussing the implications of that ban, what it means now that it's lifted, and where we need to go next. I couldn't be more honored and excited because today we are joined by some amazing panelists. The first is Blaire McIntyre. She's the plaintiff in McIntyre v. Whitmer and is a specialist in the Michigan National Guard and previously served in active duty Army 101st Airborne Division. He currently works as a uniformed civilian National Guard employee specializing in armament. Nicolas Talbott is a plaintiff in Stockman v. Trump and is an aspiring service member from Northeastern Ohio. Nick was enrolled in his university's Army ROTC program before the transgender military ban went into effect and now seeks to return to ROTC with the goal of commissioning as an intelligence officer. Jennifer Levi is the Transgender Rights Project Director and all-around legal badass at GLAD or GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders. And Shannon is the legal director and mastermind at the National Center for Lesbian Rights. Welcome, everyone. Let's get started. First, I'd like to give everyone to give a brief introduction of themselves. If you could say your name, your pronouns, and a brief introduction about who you are, I'd appreciate it. Let's start with you, Nick.
Hi, my name is Nicolas Talbott. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am aspiring to be an Army intelligence officer. In the meantime, I am working a series of odd jobs and currently completing my master's degree in criminology and global security.
Wonderful, thank you. And Blaire, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Blaire McIntyre. My pronouns are she, her. I am a soldier in the Army or Michigan Army National Guard, and I've been in the military for 10 years. And I also went to Central Michigan University, and I am a mother of two and married to my beautiful wife, Patty.
Wonderful, thank you. Jennifer, why don't you go next?
Sure, I'm Jennifer Levi, and you can use any pronouns to refer to me. I am, as you said, I head up the Transgender Rights Project at GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders, where I've worked now for just over 20 years on a range of GLAD's work, and I'm one of the two lead attorneys on the cases that we're talking about today that have ended in the lifting of this transgender military ban, and it's been an honor and a privilege to get to collaborate with NCLR over the many years. So thanks, happy to be part of this today.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. We feel the exact same way. And Shannon, let's go with you.
Yeah, hey everybody, Shannon Minter, use he, him, his, transgender man, attorney for a long time at NCLR, and it's just been the honor of a lifetime to represent Nick and Blaire and to get to work with Jennifer.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. So, like I mentioned before, GLAD and NCLR were the first to challenge the transgender military ban. Jennifer, why did you think it was so important to come out in early opposition to this ban?
Yeah, wow. So I can remember so vividly July of 2017 when the then President Trump issued those tweets saying that transgender people couldn't serve in any capacity in the military. And that announcement was an attack, not just on transgender people, although that would have been reason enough to challenge it. It was really an attack on all of us. As soon as it was announced, military leaders were outspoken in saying how destabilizing an exclusion that targeted transgender people in the military would be. It would make our country more vulnerable, and it would keep the military from being able to commission the best and the brightest. It made no sense other than to try to defeat and diminish the transgender community. But it was also really specifically designed to politicize the military. And while it was early, very early in the last administration, we could already tell that President Trump was going to follow through on every promise that he made to break us down as a nation, to divide us, to scapegoat people when he thought that it would advance his own personal political agenda. And, you know, we fortunately eventually saw how that approach backfired on him. But the day he issued those tweets, it just seemed obvious that we had to move quickly to build out a case and to keep that from happening.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So, Blaire, when we're looking at polling data, overwhelmingly, the public opposes a ban on transgender people in the military. And this is the same ban that threatened your job, one that you love and that you're good at. Can you tell me, not just from your personal point of view, why do you think this ban is bad for all of us?
Well, anytime you ban a group of people in any sort of way, you almost dehumanize them. It's not even almost, you do dehumanize them. And it really encourages harassment. If the very top level is, you know, having negative opinions of a certain group of people, it's going to trickle down to everyone on the lower levels too. And being a lower rank soldier, it definitely affected my everyday. Every single day, it was almost allowed that they could dehumanize me. And it's important when these policies are put into place, what they do to us. You know, it's, again, it encourages harassment. And another reason why the ban was so bad, the military is hurting right now with retention. It's all over their media, it's all over the news. They are really hurting. And by removing a group of people from being candidates to join is really hurting our numbers and our strength. And it's important, you know, we have a whole generation that's on the verge of retiring, and we need people to fill those ranks. And by removing a giant, trans people are everywhere, and removing such a giant, large group of people, it really is going to hurt our numbers in the future.
Thank you so much, Blaire. So something that stood out to me was how this incredibly discriminatory ban cut across so many other issues as well. There's an issue of employment, of healthcare, and freedom. Shannon, could you explain why this ban had so many horrible layers to it?
Yeah, I sure can. And I just really want to give you a lot of credit for immediately recognizing how devastating this was and that we couldn't hesitate for a second in challenging it. You really saw that so clearly right away. Yeah, I mean, so first and foremost, the military is the nation's largest employer. So just on that level, to have the military itself suddenly just exclude transgender people and say no transgender people can work for the military was bad enough in itself. And of course, it's already targeting a group of people who face a lot of employment discrimination already. So the impact was just devastating just on that level alone. But it did involve healthcare as well. The usual rule for the military is if you're serving the military, you're a service member, and you have a healthcare need, of course, the military is going to provide it. If you break a leg, they're going to fix your leg. If you have appendicitis, you can have your appendix removed. If you become pregnant, they'll provide pregnancy-related care. That's just the absolute universal rule. But then all of a sudden, they're saying, oh, if you're a transgender person in the military, you come out as a transgender person in the military, you need medical care to transition. No, you not only are you faced discharge, but you are not getting any of the medical care that you need. And in fact, they even went so far as to say, this was really chilling, that the only possible medical care that they would even consider for somebody in the military serving our country who comes out as transgender is conversion therapy. That they're like, oh, well, we would be willing to provide you counseling to quote unquote help you to live and serve in your birth sex, which we know is damaging, unethical, doesn't work. So this was just the layers and the negative ramifications of this were profound. And of course, if the military had gotten, well, if the federal government, if President Trump who ordered this had gotten away with this, it would have had a horrible spillover effect into the civilian, across the board in the civilian sector as well.
Thanks so much for that, just going through that in so much detail, Shannon. So Nick, this unfair ban has had an enormous cost to you. I saw a video where you talked about just wanting to serve your country. What do you think this ban says about our country? And now that it's lifted, what do you think that means for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this ban and even just trying to get into the United States military, it's something that I've been working toward for most of my adult life. And, as some others have mentioned, this ban really wasn't just about the military. It really set a wider tone for transgender issues in general across this nation. The message that this ban sent was that transgender people were somehow lesser or not as worthy or somehow a burden, even just the language that was used when the announcement was initially made. So this ban to finally be repealed and to see the kind of support that we've gotten across the board, the overwhelming majority of people are in favor of transgender people being able to serve the military. I think that really speaks to how things are changing in this country and how, transgender people really are just like everybody else.
Thanks so much, Nick. So Jennifer, let's go back to you. I'm wondering if you can walk us through what this executive order means for the LGBTQ community. And can you speak to how it's important even beyond its impact on transgender people?
Yeah, sure. So the order itself does a number of things. Of course, it lifts the ban on transgender people. That means that those who are currently in service, which is thousands of transgender people, can remain, and as Shannon talked about, can also get their healthcare needs met while in service. And really importantly, I mean, there have been many people who have continued to serve, but have done so silently and without being able to come out, and have really been suffering over the time while the ban has been in place. So it permits those individuals who have not yet come out to do so without fear of losing their position and without any repercussions. The other thing it does for folks like Nick and others is that it invites qualified transgender people to join up and serve. And as Blaire talked about, that's very impactful in terms of meeting the needs of the military at this point. And it does a number of other things as well, which I was really happy to see in the order. It directs the military to review the records of people who were discharged while the ban was in place. And it requires that the military correct any harmful statements that were made in their discharge records, or correct the basis for the discharge, and address, and ensure that it doesn't reflect any dishonorable conduct in the part of those who were required to leave while the ban was in place. And, and again, as importantly, it invites back those who are qualified to serve, which it's really incredibly expansive, and it's important because it includes some efforts at reconciliation and recognizes the harm that was done to people's lives over the course of those years. But you're right. I mean, the order is also important for the signal that it sends to everyone, in the military or not, that if someone is qualified to serve, they're welcome to do so. And that's true regardless of who you are. And that's really important. The ability to serve is a mark of citizenship. We've seen the military change dramatically over its years. There were decades of race segregation within the military. That was reversed by executive order. There, as we know, women have been excluded from service and excluded from particular positions in the military. That's been changed over time, and of course, gay people were banned and then served under the very harmful "don't ask, don't tell" policy, and that's been reversed as well. Like it or not, as Shannon talked about, the U.S. military is the world's largest employer, so it means a lot to have a system and an institution like that break down barriers that it has created to keep people out. And it's so important to keep pushing to ensure its full and fair inclusion of anyone who's qualified to do so, regardless of a person's race, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, and beyond. So very important step in the trajectory of the military and of our society.
Jennifer, thank you so much for giving all of that detail. We really appreciate it. So Shannon, you've said before that this is perhaps the single greatest far-reaching executive order supporting transgender people. Knowing that, what is next and what still needs to be done?
Yes, I mean, nothing could possibly undo the damage that's been done to transgender service members and the community generally over the past 4 years. But that said, in an attempt to correct it, President Biden did issue what is undoubtedly the most affirming, positive, expansive, far-reaching executive order addressing the transgender community in our nation's history. And that is really something for us to mark and to note and to celebrate. And the tone it sets, I mean, Nick, I really picked up on what you said, that the ban set such a negative tone and such a negative message about the community. And this does just the reverse. It doesn't just lift the ban, as Jennifer noted. It attempts to have some reconciliation, to acknowledge the harm that was done, and to put a policy in place to address that to the extent we can. But the real bottom line for all this is that this is not just about legal equality. It's about really recognizing and embracing and affirming transgender people as equal, respected, participating, contributing members of our society. And I think that to me is just the ultimate importance of this executive order.
Yep. Thank you so much, Shannon. So Blaire, I wanted to come back to you. What have you learned from this experience fighting this ban?
So it's interesting. I've learned how much support being a trans person I actually had in uniform. It wasn't perfect. There was, harassment, things like that. But on another note, I also had a lot of support. And that was very affirming for me, that a lot of people that I served alongside with actually supported me, and they actually were backing me up. Still to this day, they're still cheering me on. They're still sending, I've been getting text messages today, and it's awesome. We're all about unity in the military and brotherhood and sisterhood. And it's so great that still a lot of the people that I serve with still respect me as such. On the flip side, I also learned I was told not to read comments on articles, and of course I did. And I did it because I didn't want to get, beat up by reading comments, but I wanted to see what people were saying. What are people thinking? What is the idea of, the common American towards trans people? And it was very eye-opening to me. And it really helped me learn that some of these people just don't have the education with trans rights and transgender people as a whole. And it was very important to me in that moment that I realized the biggest thing that we need in this country is education. There needs to be more transgender people talking and sharing their experiences. And that really, it's interesting because, someone would look at that as a negative, seeing these hateful comments, but I found the positive out of it, that there just needs to be education. So that was my biggest thing that I really took away from this, because now I know when someone challenges me, I have an idea, because let's all face it, internet comments is the most pure, unfiltered opinions in the whole world. And So it was nice that now I kind of feel like I have a little trick up my pocket where I'm like, hey, I know where you're going to go with this, and we can talk and hopefully come to an understanding. So that's probably the biggest takeaway that I had.
Thank you so much. That's incredibly generous of you as well. Incredibly generous. Nick, I wanted to ask you the same question. What have you learned fighting this ban?
Yeah, I think Blaire stole my answer a little bit there on this one. Definitely the overwhelming amount of support I have received. I think when this ban was first announced by former President Trump over Twitter, my biggest fear was that my entire future had just been ripped away and nobody but me was going to care. I really could have never imagined years down the line that I would be here with all of these incredible people and with so many incredible, loving, wonderful supporters cheering all of us trans folks on who are trying to serve our country. So, definitely the support, and I agree totally too. Don't read the comments, but, it has been very eye-opening to see that the people who tend to be opposed to opening trans service tend to have, a handful of misconceptions that they like to fall back on. So it has been really eye-opening to see what some of those misconceptions are, to see what people think it's like to be transgender. And it's been a great experience to also be able to have conversations with some of those folks and help spread some proper information and, really get some good experiences of transgender people out there.
Very kind. Thank you so much, and also generous of you. Thank you both so much for your kindness, generosity, and your bravery. Just really appreciate hearing from you. Jennifer, the transgender military ban was lifted by the stroke of a pen, but you know that it's taken years of work and strategy fighting this ban too. What do you think has been the most helpful or effective to get us through those years so that we could get to this place?
Yeah, Monty, it's such a great question. And I might start out a little less generous than Blaire and Nick, because I want to say, this was a seriously challenging road. It was difficult and it was demoralizing. It really, tremendous outcome. Thrilled this week. So happy to see this chapter closed. But, as attorneys, we faced some of the most Orwellian arguments ever advanced. We faced attorneys representing our government who argued that a policy that required people to serve in their birth sex is not a ban on transgender people. It turned everything upside down. We faced a Justice Department that stood behind a policy which was supported by nothing, no science, no research, and that was being advanced based on positions that reflected the grossest distortions about transgender people's lives. So I want to really name and honor the fact that it was hard and that it took a personal toll on the individuals impacted for sure, and on advocates. So I so appreciate the question, because honestly, what was most helpful and what was most effective were the stories and the leadership of Nick, of Blaire. To be able to work with them was such an honor and such a privilege. It was the story of Dylan Cohere, a young man who called us, in August of 2017, who was just about to start at the University of New Haven and join ROTC, and who had planned his housing and his educational future around a policy that let transgender people openly serve, to speak out about what he wanted to bring and what he offered as a young man looking towards the future. It was the story of Regan Kibbe, a Naval Academy recruit and now a naval officer, again, who planned his life around a military academic career that would elevate him to the position of leadership for our country, and who talked about, his dream of military service and his dedication and the hard work that he put in. So it was those stories that really touched the public and frankly significantly increased the opposition to the ban, support for the transgender community. That was true in a bipartisan way across all demographics over these years. And ultimately, that's the reason why the ban couldn't survive. And there was such a recognition of how much transgender people have, how much transgender can bring and have to contribute. And I think it was those, courageous stories, that bravery, all of that brought us to Monday's signing. And that's certainly what got me through.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for getting us through this. I've just seen a lot that some folks, because this happened so quickly, that we haven't given us much credit for how long it's taken us to get here, and just appreciate the leadership of all of you on this. So thank you. Shannon, similar question. What do you think we learned as part of this entire process? The ban, the executive order, lifting it, and where do you go next?
Yeah, boy, I would really echo what Jennifer just said. I mean, the most powerful thing we learned, most important thing we learned is the power and the impact of visibility. I think that getting to see the thousands of transgender people that serve in the military, getting to learn that there are so many people, transgender people that serve in the military, has forever changed the way our country sees the transgender community. And to me, that reshaping, that revisioning is the positive legacy of this whole miserable ordeal. Because look, I just really want to say, like, transgender people don't need pity, don't even really, we all need compassion, but that's not the most important thing. The reason it's so important to get rid of discrimination and these barriers is because transgender people have so much to contribute to this country at a time when we really need everyone's ability to step up and contribute. So that, I think, is the most positive outcome of all of this.
Shannon, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for your words there. Nick, what's next for you? Now that this ban has been reversed, how do you see your future?
Yeah, the short version is I'm going to be an Army intelligence officer. How I'm going to get there, I'm not 100% positive yet. I've got a few different options on the table. I definitely want to finish the master's degree that I've been working so hard on. That should come in the next few months. I'm looking into PhD programs, hoping to re-enroll in ROTC. I'm keeping, the option on the table to just go talk to a recruiter and just go right in as an officer, and figure out how to make that work with the PhD as well. So not exactly sure the specifics yet, but I know the end goal. I know exactly where I'm going.
Awesome. We appreciate you, Nick. Thank you. And Blaire, what about you? Tell us about what this executive order means for you and how you think this will affect all of us.
It's definitely a step in the right direction. It's I really am hopeful that things will get better. I also want to be reminded for myself and for everyone that this isn't the time to get complacent, though. There's still work to be done. Changing a gender marker as of right now, if it goes back to the 2016 policy, I've heard stories of people waiting a year to 18 months just to change a gender marker. And we really need to focus on making it easier for trans people and have it so where they can go in, change their gender marker. It should not be that difficult. And again, I'm going to go back to earlier. We need more education, especially in the military. There's not enough of it. There's not enough diversity training, at least from my experience, and there needs to be more of that. I will give Michigan's National Guard a lot of props. They did have me speak last year, and it was great. I had a lot of positive feedback. A ton of officers came up and really thanked me, and they said, you opened my eyes on a lot of things, but we need to do more. It's not just a one and done and forget it. So I'm hopeful for the future that things will start. We kind of have to be very, we have to talk about transgender rights and us as a people a lot, just to kind of even out the years of where we were silenced. And I'm hopeful that eventually we'll able to just blend in and just be like everyone else. Again, equality is what we're all after, not special treatment. And I'm really hopeful that that's what our future looks like. And again, to comment on what Shannon said, we're representing a constitution. We're representing the idea of freedom. And that means a lot to me. I went to combat with that on my back, and like every other soldier, Marine, all service members. And it's really important. So again, I just really hope that everything starts really becoming equal for everybody.
Thank you so much, Blaire, and thank you so much to everyone. This has been an amazing panel. Just in closing, I'd like, can you just leave us with one thing that you'd like us to take away? Or if we didn't take away anything else, what would you like to make sure that we know? Nick, let's start with you.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, we've made so many great points here, but I think the one that we keep trying to drive home is just that transgender people are just like everybody else. We just want to be able to live our lives and go to work and just live our lives to the fullest. And we should be able to do that without having to worry about any kind of political nonsense getting in the way.
Appreciate it. Blaire, same thing.
Yeah, again, I really, really want to push the idea that education on trans people really needs to be put out there. It's the biggest thing that I noticed that, going back to what Nick was saying earlier, reading comments, it's just a lot of people don't know and they don't understand. I also really hope that the military really, takes their obligation of taking care of soldiers and reminds themselves of that trans soldiers are still soldiers. And we also need that respect. We need that care. We need that attention. And just like every other soldier, if we are taken care of, we're going to be able to complete the mission, which is our number one goal. So that is what I hope is the giant takeaway. It's education and the military, finally uplifting us and us moving forward as a unit, as a unity. So
thank you, Blaire. Jennifer, same question to you.
Well, I just want to pick up on what Blaire said earlier about hope for the future. The fact that we could see this change over really the period of time that we did makes me feel optimistic. I do think that honesty and truth wins out in the end. And the fact that there were, so many people who could speak out about the truth of their lives ultimately shifted, it shifted public opinion and ultimately the policy had to fail. But I think that speaking people's truth and that coming from transgender people makes a difference and will continue to make a difference. And I think we will see progress and improvement into the future, for sure.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Shannon, last word with you. What would you like to leave us with?
Well, that ending discrimination against transgender people, as our new Secretary of Defense Austin said in his statement, isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And letting transgender people be equal and contribute makes families stronger, makes our community stronger, makes our workplaces stronger, makes our country stronger.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I see that we have a few questions from the audience and we have a little bit of extra time. So if you do have questions, if you are in the audience and want to ask them, I'm happy to get them to our panelists. But, I want to say that there are a lot of folks thanking you for your service. So I just want to put that out there. And then let's see, this first one is thank you for your service, both in military service and fighting the law for the right to serve with dignity. What I'm unclear on is when Trump forced the order, did trans service members have to leave? So then now are they able to be reinstated? I did read that what President Biden undid. Just wanted clarity on that. Any known data on how many trans service members were ousted? Does anyone have any thoughts around that?
So from what I have heard, that they did not get kicked out for being trans. They got kicked out for failure to adapt, or they would find a reason. And that was from a very credible source that I heard that from. And that was what they were doing. To my knowledge, no one was kicked out for being transgender, but there were transgender people being kicked out for other reasons.
Thank you so much, Blaire.
Shannon, did you want to pick up on that?
I was gonna make you pick up on it, but
Well,
yeah, you go.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so there have been transgender people who have been discharged from service for coming out as transgender in the military. There was confusion, frankly, that was created by the military, which after the ban was announced, kind of tried to put the brakes on things a bit and allowed anyone who had come out during the period of open service that was in place for over a year before the ban was announced to remain in service. But people were, certainly denied medical care, in different gaps of time. People's responsibilities were changed, and there were people who were driven out, even those who had come out during the open service policy. But anyone who hadn't come out wasn't allowed to come out as transgender, and if they did, they faced discharge. We actually had another case that we brought, a fourth case on behalf of a transgender person who came out after the ban went into effect in April of 2019 and who was facing discharge. That individual, through the lawsuit, was allowed to remain. But it's pretty clear that once the ban went into effect, that there were people who faced discharge. And honestly, we don't probably know. And I think it's one of the reasons why the executive order is so broadly written. We don't know the impact that it had on many people's lives because, the military hasn't been forthcoming with that information, and they're now, directed to really fix the problems that had been created for people's lives. In terms of the number of transgender people in the military, we know it's in the thousands. Shannon, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
No, that was great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So next question I'm looking at is, do you think the new order will help transgender people who find it difficult to get jobs to find jobs and careers? Do you think this executive order will help that?
I'll jump in on that one. I mean, heck yes. Jeff, thank you for asking that question. Yeah, I mean, the message sent by this order could not be more clear that we now that the current our current president, the current administration, and senior military leadership recognize and support the competence, the fitness, the qualifications of transgender people. And of course, that's going to have a spillover effect into the civilian sector. And it just underscores, that's why this ban was so devastating in the first place. Direct impact on transgender people in the military, but it's cast a negative pall over the whole community and just sent the worst possible messages and false messages about transgender people. And so now to have it not just lifted, but to have such an affirmative declaration of support for the community will of course have all kinds of positive benefits and ramifications across the whole country.
I just want to add into it. I mean, as I said, Dylan Cohere, who's a plaintiff in one of the cases, 18 years old, heading into college, counted on ROTC And he was hoping eventually for an ROT scholarship to fund his education. He had planned his career, his post, collegiate jobs on the military support. But, more than that, we had talked to, and we have plaintiffs whose families depended on a spouse's military service. We had an individual who was losing childcare because of the potential of being discharged from the military. So absolutely, it creates the opportunities for jobs for individuals, but there are families whose healthcare, whose support for children rely on military service. And so the ban really has very wide impact, even beyond the thousands of individuals who are currently in active service.
Thank you so much. So one of the questions that is asked over and over, and I see it just popped, just went away, but Colonel Kammermeyer, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. Your question and one that's asked over and over again: what needs to happen so this can't happen again, to protect it from future presidential action?
Jennifer, why don't you answer that? Because I have to say it's such a thrill and an honor to have Colonel Kammermeyer on this. I can't believe you're here. It's wonderful, and thank you so much for everything you have done to open the way for lesbian, gay, and bisexual people to serve in the military, and for being a plaintiff in one of the most important lawsuits challenging the prior ban on service by lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. It's a thrill to know that you're listening. Jennifer, you want to answer that question about is it important to codify this in law?
Oh yeah, I think that is the answer, right? My answer was going to be legislation. Yeah, I think absolutely having clarity about the prohibition against discrimination on the basis of transgender status in service is ultimately the way to ensure that this doesn't happen again. So, I think that's absolutely the path. I do want to say that, I'm going out on a limb here though. And while that's super important, I really hope and expect that we would never see this kind of reversal of policy again in the future. I mean, as we've talked about, this chapter has so clearly demonstrated the importance of giving people who meet the qualifications to be able to serve. And, I really hope we would never go backwards. And again, because, what we learned over the course of this challenge was that it was baseless. There was no reason to exclude people. It was predicated on nothing. But yeah, I think legislation is absolutely important to ensure that we maintain that positive trajectory. And I just want to underscore what Shannon said too. It's an incredible honor to have you joining us on this webinar. And there's so many people, who did so much work to ensure that lesbian, gay, bisexual people could serve. And, we clearly stand on the shoulders of the attorneys and the plaintiffs who worked on those efforts over many, many years.
Thank you so much, y'all. So I'm looking at this next question is, now that the ban has been lifted, will there be protections placed within the military for trans folks against bullying and things like that? Do you think that's something we have to think about?
Yes, I mean, it's clear from the order that it is mandating equal treatment across the board, that under the prior open service policy that was beginning to happen, to be implemented. And I'm sure that it will going forward. I'm sure that will be addressed. I mean, now there's all the work, now that the order has come down, there is now going to be, of course, a chunk of work to implement it. The order did say, report back to me in 60 days. And Secretary of Defense Austin said that there was going to be immediate action on this. So I do think it is all going to move very quickly. So there's a lot of pieces to fill in, but on the one hand, on the other hand, it is also very straightforward. I mean, what transgender service members want is to be treated equally to everyone else. So in that respect, it should be fairly simple too. I don't know, Jennifer or Nick or Blaire, if y'all have any further thoughts on kind of what the implementation will look like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wanted to say, and then Blaire, I want to make sure you can add in too, but I don't want to be naive here. It's not going to be, well, I don't know if it'll ever be perfect, but when you've had discrimination within an institution like the military, things aren't going to change overnight in terms of people's experience on the ground day to day. We know that, of course, in terms of the ongoing harassment, discrimination that people experience in the military because of race, because of gender, still because of sexual orientation. It's going to require a commitment from leadership, and certainly General Austin's statements at his confirmation hearing and since the issuance of the executive order are tremendously important, and that needs to be ongoing direction from leadership about the importance of fair treatment for people in day-to-day ways. And the military is going to have to respond to complaints of harassment, discrimination, exclusion when people experience them. So, I don't want to be naive here in terms of, the stroke of the pen absolutely changes the military policy. Does it change the reality immediately? No, it doesn't. There needs to be work, and there needs to be continued commitment from leadership.
And so this one is kind of this might be a tough question to answer, but they're asking about legislation in particular and wondering if the Equality Act will would meet the needs here. And so I'm wondering, like there's a lot of things in that. Off the top of your head, do you know anything of the Equality Act that would really help here?
The framework of it would help for sure. I mean, specifically, there needs to be legislation that addresses non-discrimination in the military. But yeah, it's not, it's pretty straightforward in terms of codifying and express prohibition against discrimination on the basis of transgender status in the military. And it reflects certainly the same approach in the Equality Act. But I know we probably have more questions, but I just wanted to ask either from Nick or Blaire, if they had thoughts about, what would be helpful to ensure a real change in the military that would ensure full inclusion and support for transgender people who are serving. I feel like, Blaire, you were ready to respond to that, so I want to make sure you give a chance to.
Sure. And I really, I think that, again, it's kind of going back on what I was talking earlier. There's so much paperwork involved just to change a gender marker. I mean, that simple thing alone, I can only speak on the Army, which is what I've been mostly speaking on. And I do need to backtrack a little bit. When I was throwing figures out, I am talking about the Army. That's what I know. That's what I'm a part of. But I know with our branch, and from what I hear from other people, it definitely is a process for everyone as well. But for us, I know that it literally, the packet, we'll just call it the packet, which is the giant group of papers, goes up the chain, back down, then it goes to another entity. And it's so chaotic that, in Michigan, they're actually sitting down and trying to outline what's the point A to point B process. And it's and I'm bringing that up because that's really hard for us. I have to go to work presenting male, and in a way it's almost asking for harassment. It's asking for being uncomfortable. And if I could have an easy process, it would make things so much easier. That just, for some of us, like for me, I'm the type, I like to rip the Band-Aid off, and here I am. Now we can start growing as I'm Blaire, you're such and such. So I personally think, again, I also don't want to be naive, and I hope that they realize that there's some waivers that just need to be as simple as, oh, you're Blaire now, backspace F. Here we go.
Nick, what about you? Do you have any thoughts or do you have any concerns when you're looking to the future?
Yeah, I mean, just I think everybody else has brought up some really great points. Just like Blaire had been saying earlier. I think the biggest thing we can do right now is continue with education all across the board, but especially within the military, especially within military leadership. Lots of people are going to have lots of questions. The repeal of this ban is not, the end game for this. We still have a lot of work to do. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as we move forward, and to just keep collaborating with one another and spreading that good information around.
Wonderful. So it looks like that's about it for our questions. Are there any final thoughts that you want to leave us with?
While folks are thinking, what someone in the Q&A did mention that that we are facing now a whole wave of hostile state legislation that's targeting transgender kids in particular, and so I hope everyone listening will pay attention to those laws. And there's a good chance there's a proposed law in your state, because there's a very orchestrated effort. This isn't arising organically at all. It's organized by anti-transgender groups who are reaching out to states across the country and planting these laws as part of a big national campaign. So check out your state. There's a real good chance we're facing one of these hostile laws in your state. And please call your state legislators and let them know that you oppose any effort to target transgender kids. That's the last thing we need right now.
I would say elections make a difference. People speaking out about what they think and holding politicians to their commitments matter. We could be in a very different place than we are, but people's participation, people voting, people engaging in the discussion, people raising conversations about the ways in which their families are impacted by policies and laws matter, make a huge difference.
Thank you, Jennifer. Nick or Blaire, any last thoughts?
I agree with Jennifer on that. I've met so many people that say, and I was included, that you would just walk into the ballot box and just check. It's really important, and I've learned a hard lesson on that you really need to invest the time. It doesn't take much time to really invest the time and really pay attention to what's going on. So I totally agree with that, and it's very important. It's very, very important.
Yeah, I second that. Make your voice heard and hold your politicians accountable.
Thank you so much. There's a lot of ways to get this work done, and I am honored to be in this fight with all of you. I want to thank everyone for joining us. It was really a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to the amazing panelists. You are making the world better for all of us, and I appreciate you so, so much. You make me want to be better. And as always, you can find out more about GLAD at glad.org or NCLR at nclrights.org. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe and healthy. Take care.